Welcome to the October 11th UDL Implementation Trials Mentors User Group Network meeting. The agenda is linked in the UDL Forward Community Trials Mentor User Group.
Welcome, everybody. We are going to get started right away because we have a lot to get through. So we want to start with just a quick post in our user group. And if you can take a look at the agenda that was just added to the chat, that'll bring you to the link for the user group community, our Mentor Toolkit user group community. And when you go there, you'll see the first discussion board prompt is about how you currently feel about your progress mentoring your district UDL implementation trials teams. And it's a 1 to 5, kind of like a fist to 5 idea. I've put some words in there that can help you, gauge where your feeling is from sinking all the way to sunning on the beach at 5. You can either just put a number, or you can also include any words of wisdom about where you're currently at. All right, as people are determining where they are in that discussion group prompt and adding in their thoughts, we also have a sign-in meeting, sign-in, so that we can understand who's here today, as well as a place for us to share our emails so that if you find a district who's doing something that you hear about today that you think would be helpful for you to connect with that person in a different district, you have all of the connection information right here. Last look here at our discussion prompt and see where it seems like the group is at. So we have 4 people that have added in. Wendy, thank you for adding in that comment. I know sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable to say exactly where you're at, but that's what we're here to do together, to be able to decide what works for different schools of different sizes and different mentors. So Wendy says that her CSIS's a little behind in implementation and trying to get some districts on board. Recruiting is a big part of this work. So we're here to help you, and it'll be helpful for others to help Wendy understand what recruitment techniques might have worked for them too. The objectives that we have for the work that we're doing today together. We want to share our UDL implementation trials part 3, stage 1 and stage 2 progress. So this check-in is first part of that. We would like to introduce and give you time to work on part 4, stage 3, that baseline data analysis, because we're at a point in the year that perhaps your teams are already starting their baseline collection, and we want you to be prepared to help them through the data analysis part. And then we'll just engage in an idea exchange and problem solving around the UDL implementation trials work today. Michelle, do you want to introduce that PQP process?
Absolutely. So once again, I just put the agenda link in the chat for those who are just joining. And I am very excited to learn how things are going for each of you as you embark on the trials work. In the agenda, the PQP is actually a protocol used for idea exchange and sharing around specific components of the trials work. If you recall from our training, we really focused on helping you establish that mentor role and understand the different ways that you will be supporting implementation teams. We introduced the concept of the data collector. So using either the My Impact web-based tool or the data collector, Excel, excuse me. Is it Excel? It's Google Sheets.
Google
Sheets, there we go. And then we also focused on that roadmap and gave you some planning time to think through what is this roadmap going to look like. If you're a high school, are you thinking from the semester lens or a year-long lens, and how to establish those teams. So what we'd like to do is embark on a praise, question, polish protocol for each of the components that we introduced and talked through during our kickoff training. So you'll see part 3, we're asking about the roadmap and establishing teams. What are your praises or highlights? What went well for you? What questions did you encounter or do you have that you'd like to idea exchange with the group? And what things are in progress that you may want to polish and get some ideas or feedback on an approach to polish those items that are maybe kind of bulky or chunky at the time. After you think through the roadmap, we do have a stage 2, which is those academic rubrics, setting your initial team meeting and collecting the baseline data. So again, there are 2 parts to the praise, question, polish. We'd like to give you some time to do that. And once you have some time to do that, then we'd like to open the floor up, kind of an open mic, and maybe have a nice rich idea exchange on how we can support you, how we can learn with and from you, and how we can help you with any progress that you have yet to make and want some feedback or input on.
We're coming back together, and Michelle's going to guide us through some common themes that she's noticed.
So first of all, I want to thank you for sharing your things that are going well, questions that you have, areas that you want to further pursue. We have always found this protocol very good in a virtual setting. It allows us to quickly tease out themes that we can put on the center stage for both giving you some direction and some resources, but then opening it up for some great thought partnering and problem solving together. So looking at stage 2, as well as what we saw in stage 1, there were several themes that came through. Lots of thoughts, questions, and even polishing items around the rubrics, both the academic and several items around the engagement rubric. So that's something that Joe and I are going to give you some more insight and learning around today. And then we'll also point you in the direction of some resources. We saw questions around baseline data. So again, that's something that we're going to talk you through, that baseline data, how you use it, what you use, and then how to prepare for the analysis component. We also saw some questions and polishing items around learning, specifically to UDL. You know, how do you bring teams up to speed with UDL learning? So again, we will point you in the directions of some great resources that you can use to get started. Some thoughts and questions, polishing around my impact. So we'll address that. And lots of polishing and questions around finding the time to meet with teams and working through how to, best gather the teams for the work. So I think that's something that you might find a rich discussion around with each other. So we'll open that one up. So in the spirit of getting started and addressing some of the thoughts that you have, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and she's going to start us off with the rubrics.
All right. So to begin with, I'm going to start with the rubrics, and I think the best place to point you to is to the UDL Implementation Trial Mentor Toolkit. And in the tools section of that mentor toolkit, if you scroll down, you will find gotta scroll down, mentoring the academic rubric development and facilitating the discussion about observing data document. And this tool walks you through some of the common hassles that mentoring a team can come about, and also gives the rationale behind the engagement rubric criteria that are preloaded into both the data collector, the Sheets-based data collector, as well as MyImpact. But I know that there was a question about other engagement criteria, so I'll give you an idea about that as well. So when you scroll down in this document, it gives a couple of scenarios of how different teams can be organized, whether they're all the same content area in all the same grade. That's the easiest scenario, all the way up to different content areas and different grade levels. And it provides some guidance of questions that can help the group narrow their choices for what are they going to focus on as that key focus, or that focus key academic area, as well as the criteria.
Also, you're welcome to go back to the demonstration video that Joe used during the training for mentoring the academic rubric. And the training recordings themselves might be very helpful to revisit content again, and some of the key learning aspects and recommendations and tools that were used during that September kickoff training.
And so I think this gets at the heart of, James, your question about what baseline data to collect. Our project is really focused on collecting in-classroom observations in 2 dimensions, both that student engagement as well as academic progress. And while we give you some preloaded academic criteria that we ask you to use, we're not—
The engagement.
I'm sorry, the engagement criteria. Thank you, Michelle. We're not going to be so tight on that ask of you that you must use that. So I want to give you another opportunity to help define with your team what engagement criteria works best for your district. If you go into the UDL Forward community, there is a post called Engagement and How Do We Know? And I'll put that post into our chat here real quick, because there's a really nice part that gives you some ideas about what are measures of expert learning that we might tap into as criteria to know if our students are engaged. Our goal in UDL is to develop expert learners that can carry their learning skills beyond what they're doing in our classroom to any learning opportunity they have in their lives. And I think this is a good set of statements that could be personalized for your students and in your school, and how they might demonstrate their engagement through developing these expert learner characteristics.
All right, so another piece that might be helpful in understanding baseline data collection, there's a sample data collector tool in the tools page, or on the tools page. And what you can see in this example is both the rubrics for engagement and the rubrics for the academic focus. The data collection is done by the teacher or a support person who's making observations on student engagement in 4 areas. Are students making personal choices? Are they initiating and completing instructional tasks? Are they working with others? Do they participate in discussions? And so the engagement criteria is already pre-populated in both this data collector tool as well as the My Impact. When teachers are making their observations and collecting data around the indicator students, so the set of students that they're going to focus on for the trials work, they're looking to see, are students exhibiting no engagement, limited engagement, partial engagement, or full engagement of these indicators. Some of our teachers actually select a criteria to do in a class period. They may not be observing all 4 criteria in the same class period, but the baseline data comes from collecting data in these criteria prior to implementing a UDL practice. So your baseline data doesn't have to come from assessment data or some other type of data source. It's really geared around the academic rubric and the engagement rubric that is set up for the trials work. What this does is it allows a teacher to see when they deliver and utilize a UDL practice in the classroom, what is the impact on student engagement or the impact on the academic side of learning. So in this example, the academic rubric is set up around ELA, and its focus is key ideas and details. So a teacher would be making observations whether or not a student can make logical inferences, can cite specific textual evidence, can determine a central idea, and can analyze how individuals interact over the course of a text. With that said, again, they're looking to see, are students unable to demonstrate this? Can they demonstrate with prompting? Do they demonstrate in one way? Can they demonstrate in more than one way? So again, teachers often don't in one class period observe all 4 criteria. It really is based on the lesson that they're delivering. In some cases, a teacher may design a lesson so that she or he is able to look at all 4 criteria. So your baseline data is really, how are students responding or using these criteria, demonstrating these criteria before a UDL practice would be utilized in the classroom. So hopefully this gives you an example of both the preloaded engagement rubric, many questions around, what are the criteria, where can we find an engagement rubric that really is kind of done for you. And another component is here is, what does baseline data really look like? What should we be using? Your teacher is actually collecting data around these criteria prior to trial 1, where you would employ a UDL practice in the classroom.
And those teachers in a team are the one that decide that focus area and the criteria in the academic rubric. And that's what that coaching, mentoring the academic rubric development document is about. Let's open it up here right now for folks to give their examples or concerns after that, or further questions after some of those pieces of learning.
No, that explanation was helpful. I mean, because we honestly, when we got talking, your brain just goes right to the academic focus, and the engagement piece is so important. It was a good reminder that that's also part of the process. And then our brains have also been like, on what progress monitoring tools are we using for the academic growth, knowing that the rubric is part of that, but also because we're aligning it with our SLO, find other progress monitoring tools to show, you know, using a normed assessment like a UFly progress monitoring piece, or even FastBridge if we had to, but those were the conversations that we were having, so.
And I don't know if this has been your experience, James, when you've worked with folks in the past on this kind of work, but we've found with the teams that we've worked with in CESA 8 that the academics is the second thing that gets impacted. It really, we can demonstrate the impact of the change in practice on the engagement piece first. And that has really been a motivator for teachers to see the authentic and relevancy of the trials on what they're doing in their classroom.
Well, bring it all back to UDL, right? But preventing variability. So it's good, and we're excited that, I mean, Beth is going to be leading our work along with myself and our coach. But I mean, we just took our summer year educators, which Alyssa on this call is one of them. She's a 5th grade teacher, and our 2nd grade team. So those two teams are going to kind of be our two groups, our two teams, and then we're going to do this work starting as early as tomorrow. And then next Tuesday, we have a half-day release for each team to build their rubrics or to build their plans to support those rubrics. So we're feeling pretty good. We're certainly not polished, but we're on the right path.
No, I really like, and so does Missy in the chat, the connection to the SLOs and the educator effectiveness cycles. That's very powerful because it really positions the trials work to not be some type of initiative, but rather a way to really put your SLO into practice and study some impact.
It makes it meaningful.
For sure.
Right.
For sure.
And then the other part of it, the benefit for the teachers is that, I mean, what I had shared is this is your artifact, right? So when you go to load your artifacts for your SLO, my impact or whatever planning you're using with your team, that's your artifact. So that's done. You're not doing something twice, right? We're trying to work smarter versus harder. So, and I've just told them link that into your SLO work, and then at our end of your meeting, that's basically all we're going to talk about.
James, one thing that I can offer you that we've developed at CESA 8 is some template language around that SLO process. So if that would be helpful to you or anybody else, we'd be happy to share that template language with you.
Is that in the tools?
I don't know. It's not in the tools because the toolkit is meant to go beyond Wisconsin as well.
Right.
So we didn't include the Wisconsin specific template language in there.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I mean, we have until the end of the first quarter to finalize our SLOs, though they're a live document, right? They have mid-year revisions and that kind of thing. But any language help educators do that more efficiently is always appreciated. So we'll take it.
I'm going to tap into Terry here and just ask if she wouldn't mind looking that up and putting that in as a link into the chat. Thanks, Terry.
Yeah, absolutely, Wendy. Okay, any other questions or thoughts or ideas to share around the rubric side of things, or what baseline data you're going to focus on for that initial collection? All right. Well, I'm going to quick share screen and then turn it over to Joe, but I wanted to draw your attention to something else in the tools side of our toolkit. There were questions around establishing some foundational learning with UDL. And one of the things that we have is an introduction to UDL. This is a slide deck that you can use as a starting point to provide an introduction on the foundations of UDL and the guidelines that support that intentional learning design. So if you're looking for some resources to start building foundational knowledge or doing a refresher of UDL foundations with your teams that are participating in the trials or beyond to other staff, this is one tool that you have access to do some introductory learning. I know Jo has some other options and resources to share, so I'm going to turn that over to her.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Michelle. So I'm just going to share my screen again and bring your attention to the Wisconsin UDL work. And on the DPI Wisconsin, if you just Google Wisconsin UDL, that'll get you to the DPI page. But there on that page, there is a great resource for starting some learning around UDL. If you scroll down, there are some modules that have been developed by this Mia, and who else was the other? Was it Mia and I don't remember. Missy will know who.
Mia
Diane.
and Diane, but Diane's since retired.
Okay, great. So there's some modules that have been developed around some key UDL topics. And so that's one place that you can tap into for UDL learning. Another place that
Sorry to interrupt, Jo. Those modules are also linked on the left-hand side of the community in the menu bar if you just scroll down a little bit. So they're in both places. So you can actually get there if you're in the community. Those UDL online modules that will take you directly to that DPI website, and then you can get there. So if you're ever looking for them, they're in both. You can get there from both places. Sorry, Jo.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Because I forget that there's a lot more down below on the left panel of the UDL Forward community. So I appreciate that reminder for sure.
We tend to live in the trial side of the world. So yeah.
Yeah. So another key piece that has been part of the support that we've provided to districts is using your UDL lesson planner, a step-by-step guide for teaching all learners from Relabate. And that is a good primer. It's a little older, so some of the links don't work, but it really is, if your teachers want more of a technical manual, this is more of that kind of technical manual around UDL, and it walks through starting with clear learning goals all the way through designing for variability. So that's a good one. And I know I don't recall who said it in our PQP, but somebody has the UDL Now. That has also been another good entry point for some folks to get a lot of stories. Katie Novak is really good at telling stories about UDL. So that's another way for people who need those stories to be able to connect to that learning. That's a great book to start with that way. And then I know a lot of folks have used Dive Into UDL. So that's another book that has been used for book studies that's been helpful for groups of folks. So a book study alongside the trials has been a way that's been successful for other districts, but it can increase the burden on the folks trying to do the work. So little snippets of learning at a time, so that there's a more learn by doing than a learn for learning's sake going on, is, it's probably going to be a more sustainable way of going about learning. What else do you?
Well, I know that Denmark, so Jake is on today, but he is the one that is using the UDL Now. I also know that oftentimes starting with those foundational documents of what expert learners, how do we define expert learners, has been a great way to have teachers really connect to the purpose of UDL. and growing an expert learner, and what does it mean to be an expert learner. And those foundational documents are available in the user group, I believe. So again, there's some great starting points for everyone to kind of see what's the best fit for their teams or their school. I would open the floor to any of the other mentors, including our CISA mentors, of other opportunities or resources. And I want to give a shout out to Beth, because Beth has done a lot with introducing UDL and creating those presentations for UDL. So Beth, if you have any other ideas to share about building some of that UDL learning into the work, we'd love to hear your idea.
Well, I haven't done the learning side by side with implementation trials, but yeah, so I have, like, if anybody wants a slide deck, I have a slide deck that you could start with. My
You
team,
actually did, you just don't remember. You did the side by side with the Green Bay team.
oh, well, yes, I did. Yes.
You did, see?
Okay, yes, we could say that. Yes. And well, basically that was just one night that we went through and talked about the learning. We didn't do a book study, but I'm looking at, like, UDL now. If anybody wants to do a book study, I have like a Google Classroom. We can replicate, materials for that. I just bought, actually, Joe, I think I can't remember, somebody mentioned the UDL lesson planner, so I have that on my desk.
Yeah, I
But
love that book.
yeah,
I actually use that with a lot of the teams that are building some foundational learning around UDL and designing for learning.
And then last year, Sun Prairie and I did a equity by design, which is Mirko and Novak together. And but that's a little bit beyond just the basics of UDL. That's like going in deeper, but it's great. I don't know if I would do that side by side with the implementation trials because it's not as explicit, but that's a fabulous book. Oh yeah. Missy's got something in the chat too.
Yeah, the podcasts. Missy, did you want to give a shout out to the podcast?
Sure. Yeah, there's just the UDL Forward podcast. Mia and I have the way they are to this point, and there should be a couple of new episodes coming out very soon, but we have essentially gone through the granular pieces of UDL that we have in the community, and we've just sort of brought them into podcast format. So, we have an episode about expert learners, we have an episode about learning design, we have an episode about technology. And so it's really getting at those granular pieces of the discussion, but all sort of with UDL at the foundation. And so the podcast is essentially, it sort of repeats what we talk about in the community all of the time. But what I like about it is it's a slow drip method to build awareness and capacity, and people can listen sort of on the go if they're walking, doing laundry, driving, whatnot. And actually, we have gotten several emails recently about just people from all over listening. So we know that it's resonating. So it's definitely a tool that we can use to build the capacity in your districts too.
So the podcasts are available in the UDL Forward community, and I have them up on the screen, and you can see I went into the community and searched podcasts and then got the collection of podcasts that are available for that slow drip learning as Missy described.
Yeah, and they're on Spotify and iTunes and everything. You just need to search UDL Forward. So then it's in their typical, if you have podcast listeners, it's available in their regular player also. So, yep.
All right, thanks, Missy. Any other thoughts or resources to share with the group around building that UDL knowledge?
or any further questions about building that UDL knowledge?
I have a question because that's kind of where I am. So I met with a leadership team, and I guess those people who have teams and schools that are in the implementation trials, what's the best method to get that out to the teachers? Because I think that the administrative team kind of knows about UDL and has had some experience, but they said that the teachers really don't have that capacity. Do you, yeah, kind of where do you start? Like the leadership kind of knows, but they don't want to give their teachers another thing. But I feel like it has to be something that the teachers start in, like kind of a grassroots in some ways. So I don't know, any discussion around that or suggestions would be awesome.
Jake, are you here? Okay.
I am.
All right, fabulous. So Jake, I think how you approached recruiting your teachers might be helpful to Wendy. Do you want to just give her a little soundbite of how you approached putting your team together?
I'm in the process of creating goals now, but with the idea that I wanted representation from math and English departments, and then one special ed teacher as well. So I went based on obviously my observations in the classroom, but then skill set based on I guess what our purpose is of this work. So I offered it out, but intentfully, and then based on that process of meeting with a group of people and explaining what the work would look like and what expectations would be, had a few steps forward and then was able to recruit the rest to form the team that I have. But I did not open it building wide. I went in with a focus right away. That way it could meet the goal that I also have for this work.
Thanks, Jake. I appreciate you sharing.
And I think adding, making it a value add for teachers and not just a needing to volunteer is a great way to build that motivation. So some value adds are, this can meet your SLO piece, like James was saying, we want to tie it in, because then it's a value add. We're actually doing a favor to our teachers. So it's an easier route to go the implementation trials route than the regular route. So as much as we can build value in for teachers, some districts have provided stipends if it's after hours work, or if there's comp time that can be provided, or some release time to be able to do that extra planning, that collaborating with the special ed teacher counterpart to be able to design those ways to remove barriers for groups of students in classrooms that can be used across all students to accelerate learning. Those are great value add pieces to bring out to teachers so that it's not an ask, it's a value to them as well. Carrie, you were going to say something. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about when I was a director at Northland Pines, we really engaged in a lot of UDL work, not specifically with the trials, but we went through the UDL state modules, and we had leadership team structures in place. So we had a district leadership team, building leadership team meetings that happened on a monthly basis, and then also obviously staff meetings that happened at each building that involved every staff member. So the district team would engage in the learning around the module, and then those teachers would actually teach the building teams. And then at the building team level, they would be responsible for teaching all staff. So the learning was coming from their colleagues, which was really, really powerful. And then the leaders of the work, or the champions of the work, had actually had almost like that double dose of learning because they had been involved in it from the start. And it gave them a really good chance to have some input and voice in the process and in the structures we were building as well. So just, I think the more that you can involve or use some of those leaders, build that guiding coalition around the work, that can be really impactful.
Terry, can you add in the more formal process that we've used when districts see UDL as a district-wide priority. How did that learning go? How did that process go with a all staff presentation, you know, that kind of an academy of learning in the summer and then following up with a book study?
Or do you mean you want the roadmap for something like that? Or what do you mean specifically?
Well, how you've worked with several districts where, because it's a district priority and not just part of a grant project, that it's an all district learning.
Yes, and that does answer, you know, the questions that people have been having. How do the teachers get this, you know, this knowledge, right? And I can share an outline for that.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, moving on to our.
So the other theme that we pulled out are several questions around my impact and getting set up and established in my impact. And again, I will defer to Joe since this is a CESA 8 tool that is a great addition to our project to kind of give you some insight into my impact and what you might be putting on your to-do list.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you who have already subscribed to my impact, you have probably logged in at least one time to see the landing page. And some of you who have not subscribed to my impact, this is what you would be seeing. I'm right now in my preview district, so I'm not in any one of the districts who have subscribed already. For those of you who receive the district app administrator role, you will see manage schools, manage teams, manage users, and teachers, people who are teacher users will only see this top app menu, the app function menu. So the questions were around, I saw a specific question around data reports and how to see the data. So I think that question came from Niagara because they may be in the process of seeing that, but I want to just quickly show you the rubrics page, and I'm going to grab a team that does not have their academic rubric. So when a team first starts, this is the rubric landing page that they would see. And you can see that the same engagement rubric is preloaded that you saw in the data collector when Michelle showed that example. And this is the academic rubric area where teams would be adding in their focus. So I'm just going to go with the key ideas and details. And any one teacher on the team should be typing in because it changes the rubric for everybody on that same team. So they can designate a person who's going to be the scribe. Adding a criteria is just using the add criteria button. Whoops, sorry. And so I'm just going to add one criteria right now as an example. And then the rubric levels. Now, an important thing to note about our implementation trials process, and I'll show you this in the reports, is that this is not scientific data, it's not validated, and it's not precision. So we want to move our observations from 1s and 2s to 3s and 4s. So those two rubric level groups are consolidated in our reports. And when we have our teachers develop those rubric levels, we let them know at the end that 1 and 2 and the 3 and 4 are going to be consolidated in the end. So the tightness of understanding the difference between a 1 and a 2 or a 3 and a 4 isn't like a validated, rubric. So our rubric levels can be, below, close. They just need to come up with descriptors that help them understand if they're making a judgment about a student being able to in this case, retell a story, how is that student demonstrating their proficiency compared to what would be developmentally appropriate at that time? So that they can make that, they can discern that. And then as a team, generally, they have a quick discussion around what does it look like below in your classroom? What does it look like? How would you know? How could you tell if they were retelling a story, if they were above or at? So that they don't do an inter-rater reliability. They just do a calibration of, this is my understanding of it. That's my understanding of it. So we ask that teachers, every time that they do their observation, they calibrate to themselves. So I'm not shifting my understanding of what below, close, at, or above, or whatever descriptors we use, changes from baseline to trial 1 to trial 2 to trial 3, no matter how many trials we do, that I have my own calibration to my own reliability of rating my students. And that every teacher doing that gives us some confidence that when we look at the reports, we'll be able to say, even though we don't have inter-rater reliability, because I have my own reliability, I can have some confidence that this data is telling me a story about how our change in practice is impacting our students over the course of those trials.
And again, if you're looking for inspiration to get teacher teams thinking, you can go back to the example I shared earlier that has rubric levels included, and they're aligned to how students are falling into performance categories on our state assessment. So again, that idea of below basic, basic, proficient, advanced, with a little descriptor, unable to demonstrate, demonstrates with prompting, demonstrates in one way, demonstrates more than one way. So if you're looking for folks to have some inspiration or some prompts to get started, the data collector and that example would be a good starting point as well.
And that tool about mentoring, the academic rubric, also has inspiration for different ideas of what those levels could look like. So let me quickly go to the reports for a team that has some information preloaded in this preview district. So there's 3 reports that come on My Impact. It's an observation count by teacher, and I can choose all of the teachers on a team, or I can choose one teacher at a time on a team and see what their data is. So every teacher on a team can choose all to either see all of their data on the team or just their own teacher data. And what this does is it counts the number of times a rubric level 3 was seen for criteria 1, counts the number of times the observations were recorded for each rubric level under each criteria for both the engagement and the academic observation counts. And you can copy that information from this tool. The next is a criteria average by student. Oh, and let me just go back to that. So if you have a building level app administrator, a school level, you can choose all teams and you can see all of your teams consolidated together also. So you can do that at the school level, you can do that at the team level, depending on your role and the permissions that you have. Whoops, go back to team 1. And so the second way to look at the data is to be able to look at by student. And I can compare baseline to trial 1 to trial 2. I can do any comparison I want to see how many of my students increased in the level, decreased in the level, or had no change in their level in each of the engagement criteria or the academic criteria. And the way that a teacher would choose each of the student. You have to be on a teacher. So then that teacher can look at each of their students individually to see how each of those students, so if let's say I had one student on my roster that is a student with an IEP, and I want to understand, am I really impacting that student with an IEP with my change in practice? I can choose that student and take a look at whether I'm making that shift between baseline to trial 1 to trial 2. I can look at that in graph form. So there's different ways to look at this information. And then as a team, I think this is one of the more important tools or reports to take a look at, because this can consolidate across the whole team or the entire school, so we can understand together what's our impact in both engagement and academics. And this graph shows us the percent of observations that moved from 3s and 4s between the baseline to trial 1 to trial 2. So this is displaying the percent of observations in engagement going from 38% 3s and 4s to 62% 3s and 4s to 89% 3s and 4s. And likewise, the blue is the academics at the same time. So with that brief explanation, have I provided you enough kind of seed knowledge to be able to move forward with the questions you had about data collection and my impact and looking at those reports? Okay. Any additional questions that came up while I was giving that bit of information to be helpful? Okay, I'm going to stop share. If you haven't subscribed to my impact yet and you would like to, the link to the subscription agreement, I can put that into the chat.
It's also on the agenda, I think.
Okay, and it's also on the agenda, or if it's not, I'll put it there. And then you just email that back to my impact@cesa8.org and we'll get you set up right away. James, you got set up right away, right? Just lickety-split.
Yeah, it was pretty quick. And the part I liked about your little demo here is that you can look at individual kids. So like our teachers are looking at a cohort group of kids that aren't where we want them to be yet, where we call them our emerging and approaching kids. And so they can specifically hone in on the engagement and the academic growth of that. If Alyssa's class has got five kids who are below the 25th percentile or whatever. And then now they're working as a grade level, so they're sharing these kids, but she would have her own cohort group. So it's nice to be able to look at individual student growth as well. So I haven't dug around in my impact yet. I know that we're set up to go, but I think we just added Beth as a manager at admin so that she and I can start playing around in there, and then our team teachers can do it too. So.
And I just met with Carrie yesterday for 20 minutes maybe. And Carrie, you said it was enough information to feel like you could get set up.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time, but it looks like it's really user friendly. I haven't gotten a chance to go in there yet and really dig in, but I'm looking forward to being able to use it.
Okay, great. All right, I think we went over the things that we saw as really emerging themes on that document. But
yeah, the last item that was shared multiple times was really about the time to meet with the teams. So rather than Joe and I giving you our ideas, we'd like to have an open idea exchange for those of you that are working with teams already, have worked with teams in the past, or have designated time. When does that happen? How did you find the time? Where might be some opportunities to think about time differently? Incentives perhaps for teachers if it's outside of the school day. So anyone can share how they found the time or what they're thinking or planning would be super helpful at this time.
think the nice part about at Royal Oaks is, and you've talked about this already, is that marriage with educator effectiveness. And so those 2 grade levels that are on supervision or summary year, they then are, the time then is actually a part of their day. So what James is doing is they have PLC time on Thursdays. So we're going to meet initially on a Thursday and then come back on a Tuesday where I meet with each grade level separate. So a half day with each grade level, and that's where we're going to dig into the rubrics and so on. So it's actually what he's doing is it's embedded in their work, right? So it's embedded during the day. It's embedded in what they need to do. And so the neat part is, like, I think what Joe, you were talking about, it's not an add-on, it's a value add, but it's not an add-on for time for them. It's just part of being a professional in business at Royal Oak. So that has been really super great.
Thank you for sharing, Beth. Appreciate the example of having it built into the day. And from that professional learning side of things, the PLC time. Mark said, I know it's been already mentioned, but whoops. Sorry, I'm having a little, okay. As you are strategizing with your teams to add supports for students during the grant process, Dive into UDL has a great breakdown of all the checkpoints and their meaning with examples. Also, so that's another great tool or resource. Also, as you are designing your rubric, the success criteria playbook can be helpful as well. Great suggestion, Mark. Yeah, the playbooks. Teacher Clarity is a great playbook that builds in both the idea of learning goals and success criteria, or the success criteria playbook itself, another great tool. So we'll do a last call here before we move on in the agenda. Last call, final thoughts around any questions you still have that are burning and you'd like to throw out. Other ideas with resources or other suggestions of finding the time for the teams to really collaborate around the work. Okay, hearing none. We'll move on in our agenda. One of the things that we wanted to give you a little bit of time to do today was using the implementation trials participation log. You may remember this from the training, but our project asks us to really collect what teachers are participating and to gather some information about the students that will be part of the trials work. So what we wanted to do is give you some time to add your information. Some of you also asked about the subscription to My Impact. So that agreement is linked here for you. We do have some districts that we're still hoping to get your partner agreement. And so we have the link there. This would be a great time if you have not yet had an opportunity to submit your partner agreements to do that. So we want to give you about 10 minutes to kind of get started with entering your participants in the participation log, completing the partner agreements, and also giving yourself a little brain break, stretch break. So we are going to go on pause while you have a little bit of task time and break time, and we'll reconvene at 10:30. Anyone or the partnership agreements?
Are we all in the same document for this, or are there tabs for each school or each district? They're all in the same doc, I think.
All in the same doc, and you'll notice that it asks for teacher names. So it really is there's one row for each teacher that you have on your team. And I could have made that a little bit more logical to put that column first, but I didn't. So you can copy down your trial mentor information and the district and school for each of the teachers that you put on this page. We need information by classroom with the number of students that are being observed in the classroom and how many are indicator students. Let's get started again. So I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to have her point out the important pieces of stage 3 so that we can take a little time to understand the tools that support that stage 3 process.
So stage 3 is really focused on the data analysis of your baseline data. I'm going to share screen. In the UDL Forward community, stage 3 is in the parts and stages, but apparently we're having a screen share issue. I apologize. Let's try this again. But I wanted to point out, for those of you, whether you're using the data collector or whether you're using the MyImpact, there is a data analysis tool that will really help structure the conversations around inquiry and making sense of the data with your teams. So this tool is designed to do 2 things. It's designed to really look at the engagement focus as well as the academic, and it's designed to make sense of the student data, but also reflect on the educator practice. So one of the things that you'll see is an inquiry questions right at the top for each section. The engagement portion of the tool is in the yellow color, and then we have the academic in the blue. Both are set up the same way. To start with an inquiry question, I always ask teams as we're working, what other questions do you have about the academic data or about the engagement data? Then it allows the teams to really look at what happened with my data. How many students were making personal choices? How many observations did we have that were in 3s, in 2s, in 1s, etc. And then it says, across all my indicator students, how would I characterize their engagement? So what it is it's turning that metric, that number, into information. So looking at the counts for making choices, how would you characterize student engagement? And so the team would need to turn that number information into a statement. So it's really clarifying the data. So as you can see, an example here is students are not consistently engaged or at a high level making personal choices. So it really walks them through each of those criteria and helps them think about what data are you seeing in the number side of things, and how do you turn that into usable information? So most students are not completing instructional tasks. Looking at the data in this example works with others. Students are limited or partially engaged in working with others. So what, right? Why turn this information into statements? Well, that's where you can see what are the action steps or what might we do next to create opportunities for students to be more fully engaged. And again, that comes from leveraging those UDL practices. How can we ensure that the practices are leveraging student engagement and moving the needle with our students more being fully engaged? When looking at the consolidated data, so putting all of our students together, what does that data look like? And you can see some examples here. 56% of engagement criteria observations across all teachers were 3s and 4s. Most of those observations were 3s. So then it will again ask to characterize the engagement for student groups. And this allows you to kind of look at your indicator students more closely. So again, if you have students with IEPs that are part of it, how did they respond? So this allows you to make sense of the data from the student group side of things to know, are we reaching all students? Is this creating more engagements for students who are typically fall in an underserved population? And then finally, the analysis tool will ask for a summary of your findings. So what does the level of overall engagement look like in the baseline data collection window? What's a summary statement that you can use to say this is where we are in order to build a bridge to where you're going next? And then which criteria have the greatest potential for growth? So again, really turning the idea of how are we going to move forward with intent, and how do we design and apply those UDL practices to show improvement and needle in specific engagement criteria. The academic side of things is set up the exact same way. So whatever your rubric looks like, again, it will look at the number of observations at each one of those levels and ask teachers to turn those numbers into a clarifying statement. And it walks through this same process. So what does achievement look like for all students? What are some of our student groups showing us? And how would we kind of create some summary statements about where our students are with the academic criteria at baseline? So this is a tool that, again, will help you have those rich data discussions with some structure and direction. Any questions that you have about the tool itself? It is there for you in the tools section. Part 4 in the parts and stages of the toolkit, which is the baseline data analysis. After you collect your baseline data, this is your next endeavor. So you can again look at that baseline data analysis from the side of learning the stage, growing as a mentor, leading the work with your teams, and then some suggestions on knowing when to adjust. And from that point, I will turn it over to Joe to dive in a little deeper.
Well, we want to give you a few minutes to be able to take a look through that information. So we're going to short our closure by 5 minutes and give you 10 minutes right now to take a look in that part 4, stage 3. It's on the UDL Forward Community in the Mentor Toolkit portion, or it's linked on the agenda in that Understanding Beginning Engagement and Academic Levels topic. So if you dive into that and take a look at one of those 4 sections of that stage 3, if there's any burning questions that come up right now, we'll try to answer them. But don't forget to use your mentor journal, that learn, do, reflect journal, to make note of a couple of tasks or to do things that you notice as you take a quick peek at that part 4, stage 3.
So we're giving you a preview of what's to come once you go through that baseline data collection process. And we can continue to dive in deeper in next month with the data analysis. But we always feel it's nice to get that, preview ahead of time to see what you're going to be doing with that data once the teachers go through that collection process.
Right. Staying one step ahead. So we'll give you 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:50 to be able to close out this first network meeting session. Okay. I just want to open up the floor for anybody who may have had a question that pops up while they were looking through that part 4, stage 3. All right, I just popped into the chat too. So if you, as you wrap up your planning time or that preview time for part 4, stage 3, I did put the link that's also on our agenda for the after session mentor user group survey that we ask that each person who's been a part of today fill out the survey independently, because it's how we measure what our impact is on our mentors' ability to use the toolkit and the shift in their mindset around UDL. So please give us that information so that we can demonstrate to the people that give us the grant dollars that we're having the impact that's desired in a way that if we scale it, it will be impactful in education across the state.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. We appreciate that, that comment. A couple of reminders. Our next meeting date is November 9th at 9 o'clock. We've kept these at 9 to 11. And if you could please complete that UDL implementation trial participation log with your teachers and the number of students that they're serving in their classrooms, as well as the number of indicator students that they're observing. And another survey that needs to be taken care of is the survey that you actually give to the teachers on your team, because we will turn that data back to you so you understand how this trials process is shifting mindsets of the students or of the teachers on your teams. And then we use that consolidated data to make sure that our impact goes through the mentors to the teachers that they serve. So both levels of that information is important for our side of the grant, but we will turn that information back to you as well so that you can see what impact you're having on your teachers. And then I'd like to open up the floor for final thoughts about what your next step is, what you learned today that was impactful. We'll keep notes on that, or anything else that you think can be helpful to the group, to us, or just for you to be able to say what your next commitment is, because a public commitment is always one that's kept more than just a private commitment.
I mean, our next steps are, you know, we're actually meeting with Beth tomorrow. So she's coming for our early release afternoon, and we're gathering together finally our 2nd grade team and our 5th grade team. You know, there was conversation earlier about like how to get teachers to buy in. I think it was coming from Wendy and CISA 10 or something. But I mean, Alyssa's a 5th grade teacher. So, I mean, she sits on these meetings with me. So and she's talking to her 5th grade team, which automatically there's buy-in there. And then she's down talking to 2nd grade teams about it as well, and excited about it. And so, the fact that we've got Beth to kind of drive the bus with us has been helpful. So our next steps are, you know, meet with Beth on Thursday, and then next Tuesday, I got subs for half-day release for each team to kind of put their rubrics together and start brainstorming strategies to their first trial. So that's our next step. So the way they've planned this out is pretty perfect. Our baseline data is coming up, and then November, it looks like the focus was around, shoot, I just had it. What was it in November? I lost it.
The analysis.
Thank you. Analysis of it. So yeah. Feeling good, but not polished, Joe and Michelle.
No, but James, one thing that you really point out is having those system features in place to make it possible for your teams to do that work. That is so critical to success, for sure.
I think just to add to that too, is that we created the roadmap based on what the 3 trial roadmap. And so we have all of the dates in place already. And I think that is helpful too. So we know what's coming up and what to be planning.
Any of you, one of the things that we had thought about doing, and Beth and James and Alyssa, your feedback or insight would be helpful, But we thought it might be nice to share out at some point some of the roadmaps that you created as ways to just, you know, provide an example to one another. Here's what our year is going to look like, as well as any other resources that you're using to support teams. So we thought about doing kind of a share out on the roadmaps and some of the other tools so that you can see how other people are kind of organizing their time, building in that work time, and what their trial windows look like, etc. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a great idea. James, I don't know how you feel, and Alyssa, but we would, I mean, from my perspective, share away.
I'm actually trying to find it quick. I'm just searching all the stuff that Beth has sent me recently, so.
Oh, I could probably grab it. Put it in
I
the
think-
chat, James.
I made a space on our agenda to put that in the final thought. So
Okay.
please feel free to, if any of you have an example roadmap. I made it, anybody with the link can edit, so you might have to refresh to be able to get that right. But thank you for bringing that up, Michelle, because I think that's just going to be a source of great opportunity.
James and Alyssa and Beth, thank you so much for sharing. I think anytime we can learn with and from each other, it's a beneficial opportunity.
Okay, I'll add the link in there, and then I'll also put it into the mentor user group on a discussion board under some example. I'll just put example roadmaps shared during our first meeting.
We look forward to reconnecting with all of you in November, and want to remind you to please reach out if you have any questions along the way, and we wish you much success as you really roll into your trials work for the year. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.